Across Victoria, this is Drive. Call now 13 13 32 or Melbourne 96900 693.
Well, it looks like we're all turning into greenies. The Herald Sun is devoting page after page after page to this campaign for net zero emissions. The Business Council of Australia today, 3 years ago, they were against this sort of thing. Now they're saying we've got to have a blueprint to net zero emissions. They say that Australia could get 195,000 new jobs over the next 50 years. What does it all mean? What does net zero emissions actually mean for us? You know, is it, as I suspect, the end of the gas-powered barbecue? Our next guest is the Energy and Climate Change Program Director at the Grattan Institute, Tony Wood. Good afternoon.
G'day, Tom.
What does it mean? I mean, we know that probably petrol and diesel cars are headed for the knackery in the next decade, but what other changes can we expect to our society if we charge towards net zero carbon emissions?
Well, I guess we're not likely to charge. I think we're more likely to grind forward in ways that are going to be relatively clear, but every now and again we'll get stuck a bit and then we'll have to work out what we're going to do next. So I think some of the things are pretty straightforward. I think we will see a move gradually over the next 15, 20 years, even that's a long time, from petrol and diesel cars to electric vehicles, and they'll be cheaper to own and operate, and they'll be cleaner, and we won't have noise, and we'll have less diesel fumes, etc., etc. There are other things that are a bit harder. Stopping cows from belching is a bit of a trick, and equally some of the industrial activities. And you mentioned gas, so it's pretty clear, I think, that at some time in the next couple of decades we won't be burning what's called natural gas or methane in our homes anymore. Doesn't mean we won't be cooking stuff, because the modern induction cooktops are pretty good. We might still, in some cases, still like an LPG bottle for our barbecue. We'll see. There's a lot of things the bottom, at the really difficult end of the spectrum, we don't really have the right answer, and that's why we use the term net zero, because when you think about everything, zero is really hard, but net zero may not be so hard.
Right. So for example, the other day we collectively bought some flowers in here for a colleague who's just had a baby daughter, and I believe that when the purchase of the flowers went through, we were offered the chance to do carbon offsets. Now, I don't even understand how that would work with flowers, but I mean, is that what's going to happen every time we buy something? We have to pay a bit extra to offset the carbon involved in making it?
Well, it depends what you're buying. I mean, in some cases, the cost will actually, over time, the cost will be less, because as we make more and more of the green version and less of the dirty version, we'll get the cost down anyway, and so we won't notice it anymore. And in many cases, the cost is negligible. But I mean, it's no different if you fly Qantas, I think Virgin as well. You tick a box when you book your flight. Do you want to offset the emissions? Now, what happens is that those companies, Qantas or Virgin or your flower provider, they would have done a deal with somebody else to say, right, we need you to do something that offsets the emissions that have been produced when we fly our planes or when we grow our flowers and sell them. Like, for example, the fertilisers and the transport that are used to produce the flowers and move them around. So they will do that. And that's what's called offsetting emissions. So the things that we're doing on the left-hand side, we're offsetting with things we do on the right-hand side, and hopefully they balance each other out. So that small cost you pay for ticking the box to have your flying emissions with your plane journey offset, or the flowers, which I must admit I've never heard before, that is a cost that's used, hopefully correctly, to directly offset the environmental impact of whatever it is. Now, That's a bit of a clunky way to do it, but that's what it's about.
And finally, there's been a surprisingly high level of support for these nuclear submarines the federal government is committed to buying from either America or Britain. Do you think that if that happens, we might one day end up using nuclear power to replace coal-fired power?
Well, I don't think you can actually park a nuclear submarine in Port Melbourne or Botany Bay and hook it up with a long extension cord.
You just plug it in, away you go.
I'm not quite sure they work like that, but I think that's the sort of size that people are saying, look, in the future we might see small nuclear reactors of that size, which you basically put in a box and forget about them for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Now, we're a long way from that, because I think the only reason we'd end up in that space would be if either, by the time we get to the very last, most difficult emissions reductions, it becomes very expensive to keep going or even offset those emissions by doing the stuff we were just talking about, Tom. then we might have to consider nuclear power. And also, if by then, next 20, 30 years, the cost of nuclear power has actually come down. So to the point where it's commercially viable and we're comfortable that we can produce electricity from nuclear power safely. A lot of things to be done.
Sure.
These are not things we have to worry about today. At the moment, tick a box, pay the premium, get on with your life. We'll be able to make a huge amount of progress in this without having to worry about the final pieces of net zero, which others will have to worry about.
All right, thank you for your time. Tony Wood there, Energy and Climate Change Program Director at the Grattan Institute. For example, if you read the Herald Sun at the moment, there's a lot of pages devoted to going green and whatever. Now, I don't know whether it's Rupert Murdoch's had an about face on the issue or whether or not his younger son, I think it's James Murdoch, is quite environmentally aware. But there's been a bit of a changing of the guard at the Herald Sun. Anyway,